This afternoon. Let's cross to her now. Very good afternoon to you, Nastassia. What are we expecting to hear this afternoon?
Good afternoon, Zinga. And I suppose it's quite interesting that you started off your introduction in the previous package talking about those rolling blackouts or load shedding or whatever you want to describe it as. And it is under this context that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has to try and let investors know, or at least try and convince them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, given the kind of context that we're in. But to unpack what we can expect from the minister, what some of the issues that are hovering around from an economic point of view, we are joined by Professor Deborah Tickle from SAICA. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Let's, for the context of South Africans, differentiate between the medium-term budget policy speech versus the actual February budget announcement.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. So the February announcement is generally an announcement of what taxes are going to be collected for the future year and then what expenditure there will be for the future year. When we get to now, which is now November, 3 months before the next budget speech, we look at where we are for the year insofar as what we've collected, and we are expecting more than we expected, and what we've spent, and what we need to be doing from a policy perspective going forward. In fact, when the first time that Minister Manuel did this particular medium-term budget speech in 1997, that was exactly his objective, was to explain what the strategy of the government was going forward, so that when we got to February, we would have the income and the expenditure covering that.
So based on that, then, when you look at February and now, what kind of economic context are we coming into when we're about to, hear this medium-term budget policy speech at 2 p.m.?
Okay, so number one, we have to remember we have a new Minister of Finance. So the first thing we will expect to see is he going to continue on the same path as the Minister Tito Mboweni, or is he going to take a new path? So far, he's illustrated or demonstrated that he is going to continue on a stable fiscal path, which is encouraging. He will be looking at where we are, as I said. In February 2020, what we have to remember is that we were coming out of a second wave of COVID and going into or forward to a third wave. It was very uncertain. We didn't know what was happening with the economy, and the budget was extremely conservative. So conservative that the amount we budgeted to collect, for example, was the same as in 2020. So for 2022, we were budgeting the same as 2020, 2 years before. So really, we weren't increasing anything. We were just standing still. And what we will see now is that, yes, we might have overcollected, but we have to be very careful with this. Whatever the figure is, people say between 100 and 150 billion. This is not a windfall, it's merely a catching up, and we have to be very, very careful in how we spend it. And we want to hear from him what the proposal is from the government with A, the money that's not been spent, and B, this extra windfall, and how we're going to go into the future. Are we going to continue controlling debt? Are we going to be controlling spending? Or are we going to have a party? Because my view is that we can spend to the end, meaning we just spend on current expenditure, or we can spend on infrastructure, and we can build this country and create a better country for all.
On that spending, and it's a good thing that you touched on it, I was going to ask you, seeing that we've got this windfall, how would it be more prudent to spend it? Is it infrastructure, or is it paying off debt?
Well, either of those would be good. We spend over almost 300 billion rand a year on interest, which is a significant figure. It works out to 4,500 rand per person on interest that we spend. So if we can bring down debt, that would be good. But that's not necessarily going to grow the country. It will simply show fiscal stability. If we can spend on infrastructure, then we will be building, we will be creating jobs, and we will have a future country which is better than the country before. We've seen what's happening now with Eskom because we haven't spent sufficiently on infrastructure. There will be other areas that we need to spend on. So infrastructure is good, but we have to have the money to spend on that. So there's going to be a very careful balancing act that's going to have to be played by the minister, both now and in February and going forward.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. That is Professor Deborah Tickle from SAICA mentioning that it is exactly what it is, a tough balancing act between capital expenditure, which we kind of need to get involved in, but also dealing with the context of the high debt costs. And I know investors are going to be looking out for various key metrics which credit rating agencies find interesting as well. So for now, I'm going to cross to my colleague who's also at the parliamentary precinct, that is Bulelani Philip. Bulelani, over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Nastassia. Quite a lot of expectation for this medium-term budget policy statement. As I speak to you, you can hear the sound outside where there is a lot of civil society organizations and labor unions who actually have become a common feature for this function in the year to make sure that their voice is also heard by the government. But also on the other hand, you have big business who also would want to put pressure on government in terms of policy direction. Now I'm going to bring in my guest who is going to be the first one, the chairperson of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi. Obviously, quite a difficult time in the country fiscally. What do you expect from this medium-term budget policy statement? And would you expect that the new minister will make bold decisions, or will it just business as usual?
A good day, and a good day to your viewers. Let me start by saying, as the African National Congress caucus, we would like to congratulate the new Minister of Finance and wish him well with his midterm budget. I think, remember, this is an ANC minister, so he's taking a baton from the ANC minister, Honorable Tito Mboweni. So the policy continues. It's not about individuals, it's about the policy of the African National Congress. And the Minister of Finance, Minister Godongwana, is the chairperson of the subcommittee of the NEC, the ETC, Economic Transformation Committee of the African National Congress. So the issues that he's dealing with, he's quite conversant with them. I think that's very important. So we don't change policy up and down. So what the ANC has said before and what the president said, he presented here in this parliament the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan. So we expect him to put more flesh onto that. Why is that important? Is that most of the problems that we are having, whether you look at poverty, look at unemployment inequality, it's a result of the economy which has not been performing at the level that we expect it to perform.
But there is a concern around the issues of structural reform, particularly the concerns around how SOEs are managed. Would you expect him to actually extend some of the debt relief measures to all of these SOEs?
The minister, the view that we take, right? These are different SOEs, so their challenges are different. So it's very difficult to preempt what he's going to say as far as that is concerned. I think what we have also said, the policy of the ANC, is that when you look at these SOEs, there can't be a blanket approach to all of them. We must take each and every one individually and assess what exactly is happening. So as to what he pronounces at the end of the day, it's a function of that exercise, which he will then share with us. So as things stand now, I don't know. But what I can tell you, the position that we are taking as the ANC, is that we would like to urge that under these difficult conditions, that every rand that is being appropriated to government or to the SOEs is stretched, is used effectively, is used efficiently, and with a measurable impact on what we are trying to do. That becomes very important for us.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Sfiso Buthelezi, the chairperson of the Appropriations Committee. I'm going to bring now into this conversation NFP MP, Mr. Sheikh Imam. You've obviously also got a lot of expectations from the minister. Let's begin on the point of the lockdown that is ongoing. What expectation would you have from the minister?
Well, for starters, very little, because, it's a new minister, the same old policies. The problem are not with the policies. I think we have good policies in the country. The problem is with the implementation. And I think the question we need to ask ourselves, why is there a problem with the implementation? Of course, if you've got the wrong kind of people there, if you don't create a conducive environment to ensure that there's good governance principles are being applied, of course you're not going to be able to implement this policy. So we're not expecting a whole lot there. However, I can say that this morning we leaders of political parties in Parliament met with the minister, and one of the matters that he has raised, which we have repeatedly been raising, is the debt service cost and the increase in debt all the time, particularly when you are borrowing for the purposes of consumption rather than infrastructure and other development so that you can have economic growth in the country. Now, the new minister sits with a very serious problem currently because unemployment is high in the country, economic growth is low in the country, many people have lost their livelihoods, businesses have closed down. We need to put in policies now that is going to enhance the manufacturing industry. I'll give you one good example. We talk about success in the manufacturing in a particular sector, and that is the automotive sector. So why don't we replicate that to the manufacturing in terms of textiles, in terms of leather? But if you don't deal with the issue of policy, where you have chief imports that are flooding the country, number one, if you don't create an environment where you can talk to, as you and I speak here, you can see the labor unions outside, if you don't reach common ground with them in terms of ensuring that the cost of manufacturing is reasonably low so that people can be competitive and we can export as well and enhance the industry, then of course you're going to continuously be sitting in the predicament we are sitting in. You are going to be borrowing for your very high cost of employees that you are paying your labor cost in this country. So a great percentage of money is going on consumption rather than delivery of services.
All right, just because of time, we're going to leave it there. Mr. Sheikh Imam, he's the NFP MP here in the National Assembly. For more reaction outside the precinct of Parliament, Abra Babia is standing by.
I'm standing outside Parliament. I'm going to quickly grab Mr. Vavi of Softu. Sorry, Mr. Vavi. There are a bunch of people out here today representing a range of organizations. Explain to me what exactly is this protest about?
Well, all organizations are here, from the unions to the organizations of the unemployed, the organization of the youth, the women's organization, the domestic workers. It's a broad coalition of organizations who are coming together, firstly to express a message of unity and solidarity amongst themselves, and secondly to pursue the demands against austerity, in demand of the basic income grant, in demand for jobs for the 12 million people who are unemployed in the country, in demand that there should be an end to poverty. As you know, 2/3 of South Africa's population now lives in poverty, and we are sick and tired. So we have come here to demand a new budget, a people's budget, a people-centered budget. We have come here to demand that there should be a change of the economic policies, the change of the macroeconomic policies, the change of fiscal and monetary policies. We are speaking here on behalf of the people. That's why we're holding these empty pots that 14 to 20 million South Africans go to bed every day on an empty stomach. That's totally unacceptable. The macroeconomic policies have to change. They must be people-centered. Our people demand their mines and their land back so that they can use those natural resources to empower themselves and the generations to come.
Mr. Vavi, I'm going to let you go. I know they're waiting for you up on the podium. Thank you very much for speaking to us. That was Mr. Zwelinzima Vavi of Softu, of course, here to spread an anti-austerity message. He has the pots in his hand. It's there to symbolize the many South Africans who go to bed hungry every night. While I was standing here, people were chanting, Ponzi, load shedding. People here are really angry and frustrated. Excuse me. People are really angry and frustrated. But I'm going to go back to you in the studio now.
Thanks, Abra. Part of the SABC News team giving you rolling coverage in the run-up to the medium-term budget policy statement coming up at 2 o'clock. It's time for a short break. We'll give you more of that coverage after we come back. Do stay